Welcome to video 1.3, Drivers and Barriers in Educational Equity. When we think about our work here in West Contra Costa, we think about the 34,000 students that attend school here. And unfortunately, many of the challenges that we're facing here in our district, many other students face across California. When we think about what drives our work, these numbers, this data drives our work. Currently, 1 in 4 of our students meet or exceed the standards, which are the grade expectations in math, and only 1 in 3 are on level in English language arts. And these numbers are actually even worse when we look at our Black, Indigenous, and or students of color, as well as our English learners and our students that get free or reduced lunch. When we say the term educational equity, we're talking about the idea of what is fair for all students. Some people sometimes use equality and equity interchangeably, but we're talking about equity, and that could mean school models, school programs, certain strategies that are fair but not necessarily equal. What I mean by that is this. I imagine many of you have seen this image around, and it perfectly depicts what we're talking about when we talk about equality and equity. I often think about equality and think about the equal sign, like in math, that everyone gets the same supports, regardless if they need it or not. However, on the right over here, we're able to see equity, where people receive the supports they need to have equal access. And so that is what we're talking about. This is what drives our work. Educational equity, also referred to as equity in education, is a measure of achievement, of fairness, of opportunity in education. And what we're talking about here are two main factors. Fairness, which means one's personal conditions should not affect or interfere with their potential of academic success. And inclusion, which refers to the idea that everyone should have access to the same educational system. And so this is really what we're talking about. Now, when we talk about educational equity, we understand that there are many different levels of this. This is a structural, institutional system. We're talking about dividing the population. We're talking about segregating the most marginalized populations. We understand that housing, banking, education, public health, the criminal justice system are all huge problems that are difficult for one single person to attack. What we truly believe is that those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. This is a quote by Glenn E. Martin, and it's a slogan based on history. There's never been a social justice movement that has ever succeeded without the full participation and leadership of those most affected, whether it has been the movement to vanquish HIV and AIDS, whether it is historic achievements in civil rights, or the women's movement, or even the LGBTQ movement. Those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And so, yes, we understand that there are systemic challenges that we are facing. And at the same time, we understand that systems are made up of individuals. And as individuals, as leaders in educational equity, we have to look at ourselves. In order to overcome an entire system, we truly need to reflect on our own leadership and examine how we are showing up. When we think of the ideal leaders, whether that is in your job, your community, your place of worship, or in the fight for educational equity, we know that many leaders say, do, and feel certain things. They may say things like, "We can do this together. What do you think? Tell me your concerns." Maybe they are or they do things that are courageous, hardworking, where they're able to delegate the work, and they unite people, especially along lines of difference. They may feel things as confidence and passion, where they're committed to the work. Now, what are the things that can get in the way of work? What are the things that prohibit us from being a strong leader? We understand that there are many barriers that we face in reaching our optimal level of leadership. Many of those are systemic, but they're also around lack. lack of resources, including information, knowledge, money, skills. But what I want us to really focus on right now is our own personal barriers. In her book, Daring Greatly, How the Courage to be Vulnerable Transforms the Way We Live, Love, Parent, and Lead by Dr. Brené Brown, she discusses shame, courage, and vulnerability. I truly believe that one of the biggest personal barriers to showing up and being a strong leader is that shame, the idea that we are not enough, that I am not smart enough, I don't know enough, I don't make enough money to impact this, I don't know enough people to help me. Those barriers truly stop us from creating an impact in educational equity. And really, that fear comes from our biggest fear. If they really knew me, they would reject me. That disconnection is every human's biggest fear. And so what we need to go to is offering ourselves grace and being able to distinguish shame, which is I am bad, who I am was bad, versus guilt, the action, I've done something bad. So being able to differentiate the person from the action is crucial to judging ourselves and others in this work. And what we're talking about is vulnerability. Brené Brown says you can't get to courage without walking through vulnerability. And so when we're talking about vulnerability, that is uncertainty, risk, and emotional exposure. And I don't know anything else that encaptures being a parent more perfectly than this phrase, vulnerability. Being a parent is scary, uncertain, and it exposes us, right? We absolutely adore our children, and we will do anything we can to support them. And so inherently, being a parent advocate talks about vulnerability. One of the factors in this is the idea of gremlins. Now, I am an 80s baby, and so I grew up watching this movie, The Gremlins. And gremlins are kind of like that little inner critic, that voice that shows up and tells you messages that are kind of mean. So my gremlin tells me, you don't belong here. You're not smart enough. You can't do this. They're going to laugh at you. And so what I would love for you to do is on your notebook, take some notes. What does your gremlin look like? What does it say to you exactly? What are the phrases it says to you? And when does it appear? Go ahead and hit the pause button. These are notes just for you. No one will read them, so go ahead and be willing to be vulnerable. Hit pause. Okay, welcome back. Hopefully that was insightful and really brought forth some deep emotions and some deep ideas that you know are actual barriers to you being a strong advocate and just a human in life, really. So if you want to know what the remedy is for your gremlin, it is make it your personal cheerleader. The whole reason we have a gremlin is to protect us. Maybe there was a time where you were little and you embarrassed yourself and that gremlin was like, oh no, we shall never do this again. I will make sure of that. So what they're going to do is they're going to protect us, quote unquote, and they'll keep us small and they'll keep us safe and they'll make sure that we stay put. But at the end of the day, staying small and safe and staying put is not what our children need, not what our community needs. We need true leaders that can stand up and say, thank you, gremlin. Thank you for showing up. I will be just fine. Thank you for trying to protect me. I'm going to try anyway. And if I fail, I will be okay. Obviously, this is a conversation you're having in your head. You're not having out loud with your gremlin. But I've found that it really helps me stay grounded, be vulnerable. It helps me be vulnerable. So to wrap up, these are the main points I'd love for you all to take from these last 3 videos. Go Public Schools West Contra Costa is an education nonprofit. Our values inform our action. Educational equity is a measure of achievement, fairness, and opportunity in education. Educational equity drives Go West Contra Costa's work. Shame is a major barrier in our leadership journey. To get to courage, we must walk through vulnerability. At the beginning of the videos, we shared our session goals, which were to better understand Go West Contra Costa and the Family Leaders Program, identify our personal values, define educational equity, and identify our barriers. I think we've hit all of those. So in closing, head back to the Google Classroom and complete assignment 1.2, Educational Equity Exit Slip, and I'll see you for our next class.